Well, good afternoon, everybody, and a very warm welcome to this afternoon's event, Slow Looking, a Portrait of Charles II. And this event is a collaboration between Royal Collection Trust and Limina Collective, and we're delighted that you've been able to join us for this event. We very much hope that you'll be able to relax and enjoy this afternoon. You may wish to have a pen and paper nearby that you might use for part of the event. So I'll give you a little information about what to expect and hopefully some advice as well on how you can best enjoy the event before I move over to introducing our speakers. So as I say, you may wish to have a pen and paper nearby for certain parts of the event. There will be a question and answer session towards the end of this afternoon's event, which we very much encourage your questions. However, we would ask that you refrain from inputting your questions into the YouTube chat for the guided elements of this afternoon's event so that you can best enjoy those guided looking and slow looking elements. If you would like to enable captions, you should be able to do so on YouTube by clicking the CC, the closed caption button. So do make use of that if you would like to do so. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce our speakers for this afternoon who'll be guiding us on this journey. So I'm delighted that I'm joined by Lucia van der Drift from Limina Collective, and Lucia will be taking us on the journey through lots of those guided elements of this afternoon's event. And also I'm joined by Emma Stead. Emma Stead is curator at the Palace of Holyrood House, where the portrait in question can be found and visited in the throne room at the palace. And so we'll be hearing from Emma a little bit later on. But without any further ado, I'd like to hand over to Lucia, who will take us on our journey from here. Lucia, good afternoon, and over to you.
Oh, thanks so much. Thanks so much, Lucy, for that lovely invite. And I'm really delighted to be here, also joined by Emma. And yes, we're starting this session actually shortly with a short meditation. And I really hope that you're going to join in with me, even if you think, oh, I can't meditate, or I don't want to meditate, or I'm too stressed out to meditate. So just really inviting you to just join in and see how it goes. Just a few minutes of that shortly. So as Lucy said, my name is Lucia van der Drift and I'm part of Limina Collective. And after we've done a short meditation, I'll tell you a bit more about how we can apply mindfulness to looking at art. And we're going to look at the portrait, of course, after that, the portrait of Charles II. Yes, so hopefully you want to join in with me now for a few minutes of meditation. And I just hope that you can be uninterrupted for a bit. Maybe put your phone on non-disturb for a bit. But let's just sit in our chair as we do and feel that body on the chair. And particularly if you're very stressed out or very busy, I invite you particularly to join in, and perhaps just feeling, however that is, that busyness in your body, perhaps just feeling your body, and maybe you can feel into that busyness a bit, or that feeling of being a bit stressed out or overwhelmed, or maybe you're completely relaxed, which would be wonderful, and then you can feel into that a bit. So let's just feel the body for now, perhaps closing the eyes if you hadn't done that yet, if you feel comfortable, or lowering the gaze. And I've got my feet on the floor, the soles of the feet touching the floor. My knees are hip-width apart, which just means that I can sit comfortably. So I invite you to do something similar. I have my hands on my legs, palms down. You could have them in your lap. So just feeling that body on the chair. And perhaps you can feel the weight of the body on the chair, allowing gravity to pull you down. Just sensing the weight of that body And perhaps if you feel any resistance, maybe just wants to kind of let go a bit, open up a bit. So feeling the floor under your feet, maybe the seat underneath you, or perhaps a backrest in your back. So just feeling those points of contact. And then perhaps also just noticing, how do I feel? I might feel irritated, or I might feel sad or joyful. Perhaps there's some sort of mood at the moment. We might just want to notice that. And maybe when we're noticing that, we could somehow receive it with friendliness, like we're meeting an old friend. And then perhaps also noticing any thoughts that might be coming up for you right now. Fast thoughts or slow ones, or maybe no thoughts. Ungraspable thoughts. So feeling the body, being a bit more tuned in perhaps to how we're feeling, what kind of thoughts we might be having. And then inviting you to listening to any sounds coming to the ear, any background sounds. I've got a pigeon here, some voices. So we're sitting on the chair, weight on the chair, and then inviting you to open the eyes and direct your attention back to the screen in front of you. The computer screen or phone screen, whatever you're using today. Well, I don't know how that was for you. I feel a bit calmer, but maybe you don't. It just depends, doesn't it, on the day and how we're feeling. And so yes, we're doing in Limina Collective. I'm part of that together with Carly Allen. You might have heard of her. We're applying mindfulness principles to looking at art, and you could say you can combine practicing mindfulness with looking at artworks. And the benefits of mindfulness itself are very widely researched, and if practiced regularly, it can have all kinds of beautiful benefits, like it reduces stress, and it can calm the emotional brain, and it could also help us to act rather than react, if there's a bit more space around our thoughts, a bit more knowing what we're thinking and that kind of thing, and what we're feeling. So that's when it's practiced regularly, but we've also noticed time and again that a little mindfulness goes a long way, and even just a few minutes today might make a difference to your day. I hope it will. So we're using the interest in an artwork and also the features of an artwork to help training mindfulness, because it might be interesting to look at an artwork, so you can really use that well. And just as we're focusing on internal objects, like we're noticing the sensations in the body, we might notice that contact with the floor or the emotion or any kind of sense of thoughts. So you could say those are internal objects, and with art, we're just using outside objects, external objects. So we're focusing then on colors and on shapes and on formations and on light. So that's what we're then focusing on, and we're using that to guide our mind back to the present moment, really. Because with mindful looking at art, what we're trying to do is keep our attention on the features like color and like shape, etc. And through doing that, that helps steadying and calming the emotional brain. So that might help if we're feeling a bit agitated. And it's a very simple cognitive processes that we're using, just looking at a color, following a line, and that uses the frontal part of the brain, and then the other part of the brain, the emotional part of the brain, is then calmed down. That's how it usually works. But also, when we're doing this, practicing mindfulness in this kind of way, we're also learning to bring the attention back from whatever we're thinking about, like the past or the present or the future, planning, rumination, and from rumination, particularly worrying thoughts, anxious thoughts, isn't really that great for us. So if we're learning to call our mind back, the mindfulness back from whatever it's entangled in, to the colors, to the shapes, we're training that capacity of the mind to do that, and then that can really help you outside of the meditation, because you're learning to make that movement out of that rumination into the here and the now. So that's where some of those benefits come in. And lastly, mindfulness is not only about that bringing back the attention again and again, but it is also about the quality of that attention. And what we're trying to do is to look at something with a non-judgmental kind of quality, a more open and curious quality, and that is also then hopefully going to help us, and particularly in relation to the artwork. We might have a strong response to it, but we could kind of go past that by again looking at colors, shapes, etc., and often ending up with a sense of bonding with the painting that we're looking at. Anyway, that is me with my introduction to how mindful looking might work. But obviously we want to do some, and that's what we're going to do now. I'm going to share my screen with you. That's my first slide. And I'm going to introduce the painting to you. And this is here, and this is the throne room in the Palace of Holyrood House. So that's the King's official residence in Scotland, and it's near Edinburgh. You probably knew that. And then just to make sure we know what we're talking about, I've got that blue arrow there. So you can see that in that left-hand corner, you see the portrait we'll be looking at today, Charles II. And then we see it a bit closer up, just see the beautiful wood paneling on all these sides, and just getting more of a sense of what it would be like to actually be here in this room, stood in front of this amazing painting. Now just a few details to share with you. Just seeing that painter is John Michael Wright, and you can see that's the 17th century, and this is a portrait of Charles II, and it was painted between, I think, 1671 and 76, somewhere between those years, and I think Emma's going to talk more about that later. And then we also see, if you look at the right-hand side, the height and the width of the painting. Well, we also saw that when we saw it situated in that room. That's quite a large object, and you can see the inches next to it if you're not metrical. And it's oil on canvas. So we've got a few bits and pieces now about this painting, and I'm now going to take you into a guided look at this painting. And so hopefully you want to join in with me. That part of the session is going to be about 12-13 minutes or so. Oh, and after that we'll do some reflective writing if you want to join in with that. So I'm going to take us to the painting now. So here we have the painting in front of us. You might want to up the brightness of your screen if you haven't done that yet. I've just done that. Makes a big difference. Let's just start by noticing what we're looking at. We're looking at this painting, and maybe just now, as we're looking, you might just want to notice your response. So how am I feeling now? What do I notice in terms of any emotional response I might have when I see this, when I look at this? And regardless of what that is, we could just maybe note that, whatever that response may be, just note that there is that response here. But let's just take a good look at this painting. So we see a lot of detail, and there's no need at all to take it all in at once. I don't need to know everything about it even. But let's just come into seeing, so the visual sense of the eye. And of course, we see there's this figure in the middle that we'll be looking more closely at a bit later on. But let's just look at that space around the figure for a moment. So we see some people there in the background on the left-hand side and on the right-hand side. Let's just note that there's some people there. And then obviously also we have that tapestry, which is a canopy. And let's then look at that tapestry a bit more. Noticing the pattern on the tapestry. We'll have a chance to look at it a bit more closely a bit later on, but just noticing there's this pattern on that tapestry. And also we see the arms embroidered there. Above the head of the king, you see crown and these two creatures on either side. And when the mind goes into wanting to know, or maybe being sparked off by associations, maybe just noticing that and coming back to just looking at all sorts of details we might see. Now inviting you to find any verticals in this painting, just finding some verticals, following them down with your eye. Might find the verticals in the canopy or maybe in the people. And also perhaps finding any horizontals here. Wherever you find those horizontals, we're just noticing those lines. And then let's just make a journey through any colors we might perceive here. Finding white colors in the painting. Doesn't have to be perfectly white. Finding ivory tones, perhaps. And greys. Silver tones. Blacks. So just getting a sense of those colors, the use of those colors here. Just picking it up with the eye. Blues, do we find any blues? And any greens perhaps? Might be fainter, paler greens. And then possibly any pinks. Or oranges. And then also red, the color red. There's quite a lot of that color here. Let's just look at the red. And inviting you particularly to look at that robe that this figure is wearing, the velvety red, the red on that robe. Also noticing that white fur aligning with the black spots. And perhaps also having a good look at the folds and the drapes, the way the fabric is draped, just disappearing in the lower right edge there. So that's how long that robe is. So just noticing those drapes, folds, perhaps the shadows and the light on those drapes. All around this seated figure. And perhaps also noticing that gold embroidery along the edges of this robe. Let's look a bit more closely. So inviting you to pay particular attention to the hands. Let's start with the hand on the left side first. The hand itself, noticing the separate fingers, the wrist, the palm of that hand. And then also, of course, noticing that object, the scepter in his hand here, and some of the details on that scepter that we can see from here. And then let's shift our attention to the right hand of this. No, it's the left hand of this person, but the right hand for us. On the right hand side, you can see the fingers holding an orb. Perhaps also seeing those individual fingers there and part of that wrist of that hand. And then also noticing on the orb the roundness of that object, the shadows, with some of the jewels and the cross. And then perhaps moving the attention slightly to the left, we see a hilt of a sword sticking out. And then arriving at those legs encased in silver stockings and some puffy pantaloons. Perhaps just noticing the shadow on those legs, showing how the light falls on this leg. And then also noticing those shoes, high heel with a jewel buckle elegantly, and it's resting on a cushion, brocade, so we might see the pattern of that cushion. Let's just briefly going to ask you to shift the attention slightly and go to touch in our, just inviting you to feel the sleeve. If you have a garment, that's the sleeve, just to feel with your fingertips, feeling that texture. Under the fingertips, it might be rough, it might be smooth, you might have to go for your trousers or your skirt, just feeling the texture of the fabric. And then let's go back to that painting and just noticing the different materials that are used here, that are painted here. So possibly the lace on those cuffs of his sleeves. And then there's the silk of the pantaloons and the stockings. So just noticing how that light's reflected on those materials. And then the fur. Getting a sense of that texture. And then also the velvet. Let's look a bit more closely now. Getting much more of a sense of the presence of the face. But let's just look at the texture of the hair first. And then also noticing the crown on his head. With also some velvet, it seems. Painted jewels. And then let's look at his face. The eyebrows. And both the eyes. The nose. Notice how there's a shadow on one side of that nose. A bit of shine at the tip. The moustache. And then the lips. With the chin. So let's look at that whole face framed by this hair. What expression do you see on his face? Let's just come back to the whole painting again. Coming back to those people on the sides, and maybe we can imagine that's all of us who are watching this session, looking at this portrait, everyone together, looking at this portrait in 2023. So let's connect back to the here and the now, feeling the body on the chair. And then I'll stop sharing the screen for a moment. So we've just been looking, having a mindful look, you could say, or a slow look at this painting, different details, etc. So now there's a chance to respond in writing. If you want to join in with that, I have a few prompts for us, which is altogether going to take us about 10 minutes. And I just thought I'd tell you a bit about this kind of writing that I propose we do right now. It isn't about writing a text. It's not about getting it right or having all the punctuation perfectly in order. It isn't about that. It is more like giving some expression to your thoughts and what might be going on at the moment in your mind. So we're not writing this for publishing. We're just writing and encourage you to let the writing flow, just allowing it to flow from your pen or from however you're going to write, and just to say that your words are exactly right. So that's I hope that you find that encouraging. So just for the next few minutes, inviting you to just write about your response to this painting. So this is just going to be a few minutes of writing a response to this painting, and I won't say anything anymore, but I will show you the painting again. And then my next prompt is just write about how you may differ from this sitter. Write about how you may differ from this sitter. And then my last prompt, if you want to join in with this one, write about what you may have in common with this sitter. Write about what you may have in common with this sitter. And then perhaps finally, so this is not a prompt, but a suggestion for some reflection on what you've written. Just read what you've written for your own response and maybe how you may differ from this sitter, and what you might have in common with this sitter. And then once you're reading it, maybe you just want to underline a few things that really strike you, or things that you found interesting, or things that you discovered, or maybe make a few notes in the margin or write a few more sentences. So this is just us having a few minutes to reflect on what we've written in this bit. So that was a few minutes of reflection time, and I shall now stop sharing the screen, but we'll be seeing it back a bit later. So thank you so much for joining in with this part of the session. I enjoyed it. I hope you did too. I think I ended up actually really liking the sitter. I must say I didn't really like him yesterday, but I like him now, so that's a great sign. So over to Lucy, and we'll see each other later.
Well, thank you ever so much, Lucia, for guiding us through that exploration of a really wonderful work of art, and really delving into those details of the shadow and the silk and the shoes, robes and regalia, and there's so much to observe and so much to take in there. So we've been stepping quite close to the work, and now we're going to take a wee step away to be able to place that work into a little bit more historical and artistic context. And in order to do so, I'd like to now hand over to Emma, who's going to lead us for this part of the event.
Thank you so much, Lucy. I think Lucia is very kindly going to bring that large picture of Charles back up again so we can see. And just to start by saying, I really enjoy that very slow look at the painting. It's one of my favourite objects. So I'm glad that Lucia has come round to the sitter as well after having spent some time looking at it. It's a very powerful painting. I think we will all have felt that over the last few minutes. It's an outstanding example of the artist's work and a very enduring image of the monarchy restored. Charles II is dressed in the Parliament robes over the Order of the Garter. He's wearing the crown of state, the sword of state, and the Garter Collar with the Great George. And he's holding the Orb and the Sceptre, newly made for his coronation. The king is shown seated under a canopy of state, embroidered with the royal coat of arms, in front of an armorial cloth of honour, with a tapestry depicting the abduction of Romulus and Remus partially visible behind. The formal hierarchical pose of the king, normally seen on seals and coins, together with this very symmetrical design and meticulous attention to detail, really recalls depictions of earlier English monarchs such as Henry VIII and Elizabeth I, and suggests the continuity of the royal line. Now, Charles II came to the throne in May 1660, following the period known as the Commonwealth. His father, Charles I, had been ousted during civil war and later executed, and the country had been ruled by Oliver Cromwell. Following his time in exile on the continent, Charles II arrived in London on the 29th of May, 1660. On an auspicious day, it was his 30th birthday, and he immediately set about re-establishing his authority. And I think we see here in this portrait of Charles that we're looking at an obvious display of this intent of majesty, really showing Charles's lineage as king and therefore his right to rule. The painting is by a British artist, John Michael Wright. He trained as an artist in Edinburgh under George Jameson. He was Catholic and spent long periods of time in Rome as well as London. He was the son of a tailor, and I would suggest that this is why John Michael Wright paid such close attention to fabrics, as you can see here. He really does show his sitters with these very complex patterned fabrics. You really get a sense of the texture looking at this painting. There is uncertainty over when the painting was made. One opinion is that it dates from early in Charles's reign, painted shortly after his coronation in April 1661. Now, the portrait shows the king wearing the coronation suit ordered for his coronation and wearing the regalia made for him by Sir Robert Viner. But anachronistically, the king is shown with a full-bottomed wig with the centre parting, and other accessories such as the fantastic jewelled buckles on his shoes suggest a later date for the painting of the 1670s. A letter from John Michael Wright to his patron, Sir Walter Baggot, survives in the National Library of Wales. Dated the 27th of July, 1676, it says, "I am told the king will sit to my great picture for the city this next month." Now, we don't know, of course, if John Michael Wright was talking about this painting, but it is worth saying that there's no other surviving portrait of Charles by the artist. So the date of 1676 is becoming more widely accepted by art historians, but obviously there's a remaining element of uncertainty. I'll of course let you make your own minds up, but I would be interested in knowing your thoughts. For example, does the sitter look like a man of 30 or a man in his mid-40s? You can see now this argument. Now, I mentioned earlier that this astonishingly powerful portrait of Charles shows him with some of the crown jewels made by Robert Viner. The medieval crown jewels had been melted down during the Commonwealth, with the exception of the spoon used to anoint the new monarch with holy oil during the coronation. And so a new set were made by Viner in 1661 for Charles II's coronation. Costing almost £32,000 in total, the set comprised St Edward's crown, 2 sceptres, the orb, the ampula, spurs, armils, and a staff. And the heavy St Edward's crown, weighing 2.23 kilos, or 4.9 pounds, was of course used to crown King Charles III just a few days ago. And the king was presented with the other regalia, including the orb and sceptre seen in this portrait. Robert Viner was a banker as well as a goldsmith and patronised the artist John Michael Wright. He was later mayor of London, and it is perhaps possible that it was he who commissioned the portrait that we see here. Certainly there's no record of it having been a royal commission. It only entered the royal collection in 1899 when purchased by Queen Victoria. One thing I haven't mentioned at all so far, but we did see earlier, of course, is the sheer scale of the painting. Measuring 281.9 centimetres by 239.2 centimetres, the portrait certainly does make an impression. Visitors to the Palace of Holyrood House here in Edinburgh can see it hanging in the throne room. It's opposite the door as you come into the room, which would have been the original positioning of the throne within the room. It really adds to the sense of grandeur in the space. It's so majestic, it does take your breath away every time you come into the room. It's certainly one of my favourite moments in the visitor journey throughout the palace. I feel like this portrait of seeing Charles enthroned like this really does bring that element of the throne room to life. You do absolutely feel that he is about to step out of the painting and into the room. And of course, it's entirely appropriate that it hangs at the Palace of Holyrood House today. After all, Charles had the palace rebuilt in the 1660s and 1670s. And so to have this amazing portrait of him painted by a Scottish artist on display at the Palace of Holyrood House just feels like an absolute dream come true.
Well, thank you ever so much, Emma, for also then placing that into context for us. And I couldn't agree more when you say it really does feel as though the sitter, Charles II, is about to step off his throne and into the space as well. And speaking of bringing people into the space, I wonder if I could bring Lucia back into the room, and Emma as well, if we could all come together, because I know that actually even already we've received some questions from people watching at home and various places, questions about what they have seen so far this afternoon. So I'd like to put those questions to you both, if I may. Starting perhaps with yourself, Emma, as you just mentioned there, quite a few of the items that you mentioned are names and items that people will, of course, have heard in the last few days and heard those mentioned. So we have had a question with somebody asking, is this the same regalia we saw Charles III wear with the orb, the sceptre, and especially the crown?
So yes, for the orb and the sceptre, with small changes, those are exactly the same items that we saw used at the coronation on Saturday. But the crown is different. So the crown that you see Charles II wearing in this portrait is the equivalent of today's imperial state crown, which is the one that the king wore at the end of the coronation when he was leaving Westminster Abbey. It's used today at the opening of Parliament as well, but the current iteration was made in 1937 for George VI. The equivalent of that was known at the time as the crown of state, and traditionally St Edward's crown was treated as a holy relic, so it had to remain in Westminster Abbey, so it wouldn't have been available to be used as part of this portrait. But yes, absolutely, the orb and the sceptre were the ones used on Saturday.
Thank you, Emma. And actually, another question for yourself, looking now at the background of the portrait, does the tapestry in the background of the painting survive?
Yes. So the tapestry shows Romulus and Remus, and it was from we know it belonged to Henry VIII. And I think that, again, adds to that impression of the unbroken lineage of majesty, which is harking back to the Tudor dynasty. So the tapestry does still survive today, Lucy. It's in a private collection.
Thank you, Emma. And Lucia, a question for yourself. I'll read this out. I found the painting very busy. From your experience, do you think less complex works make slow looking easier for new people to practice?
Oh, well, that's a really good one. I did think there was a lot going on in that painting, which I also thought, yeah, it's interesting, I think, to discover. There's just so much to discover if you keep looking. I don't think we should give ourselves the task to see everything when we're looking at a painting. I actually sometimes think I've got a replica of a Japanese mountain, Mount Fuji, on my wall, and I often see it, but I don't think I ever really see it, because you keep seeing new details. So yes and no, I don't know. You might want to try it out with something quite simple, and you could try it out yourself by just selecting an object of art and that you find pleasing, and just having a go at it. Look at the colors and look at the shapes, and maybe following some lines and look at the background. So you could do it yourself and guide yourself. I do recommend, if you do choose your own painting, that it is peaceful and uplifting, and so you don't spend a lot of time looking at something quite disheartening and or violent or something. So yeah, that's my tip.
Thank you, Lucia. And I know for myself, I certainly noticed things that I've never noticed before through our looking this afternoon. But actually, following on from that, a further question. This was asking if you had to choose one, which detail did you find most striking in this work?
Myself. Oh, I must say that in terms of the details, I just love those shoes. Don't you love those shoes? If you have a really good look at it. And when I was writing about what do I have in common, actually, I won't show you because I've got a bit of golden kind of glitter on my shoes at the moment. I thought that we do have in common. But I just absolutely love the elegance of these shoes and the kind of, they're just so narrow, and then these lovely heels, and you kind of think like, I want those shoes. Anyway, so that's for me personally, and I also really like the brocade, the cushion with the tassels. We didn't really spend much time looking at the tassels, but I love that too. Yeah, just saying.
Well, that actually leads very nicely on to another question that we've had, and that's actually about, I believe, the item you're talking about. So this question, and I wonder if I can come to you, Emma, with this. The pillow is an interesting addition to the scene. I wonder if it was to adjust for his feet not being able to touch the floor.
I think the pillow is a very deliberate addition to that painting. I think it adds to that sense of the elevation of majesty, and of course, you know, as Lucia says, it really shows off those fabulous shoes. So I'm sure it's very deliberate.
And I'm also going to come to you, Emma, as somebody who's seen this portrait many times in the space in the throne room. Was there anything new that you noticed today that you haven't noticed before?
I see something new every time I look at this painting, which is really what Lucia was saying. And in person, you get an even more sort of exaggerated display. And of course, because it's so tall, you have to be really quite close in order to pick out details. For me today, I was really noticing the fringing on his breeches, those lovely silk sort of loops. And just that sense of texture that the paint provides for us. That's really what I was looking at when Lucia was talking earlier.
Thank you ever so much, Emma. And thank you both, Emma and Lucia, for answering those questions. And thank you, everybody, for asking the questions this afternoon. And very much hope that you've enjoyed finding new things to observe in the work as well. And so that brings us towards the end of our event this afternoon. Just before we part ways, however, I do have a few bits and pieces that I would like to share with you if you'd like to find out more about the work of art in question, further works, and how to visit, for example, the Palace of Holyrood House. So I'll just share my screen with you one final time just now. So on my screen, you'll be able to see that there's information about how to find out information about the Royal Collection Trust by visiting our website, www.rct.uk. You can also visit our online shop. You'll see the link just there as well. And as I've mentioned, ways in which you can find out about visiting in person if you are interested and able to do so: the Queen's Gallery at Buckingham Palace, the Palace of Holyrood House, and Windsor Castle. And there's a really wonderful tool as well on the Royal Collection Trust website that allows you to search for different works of art and see those in really close and intricate detail as well. And that's in the Explore the Collection part of our website. So as I say, if you'd be interested in finding out even more about this wonderful work that we've focused on today, you can do so there, and also find a myriad of other works to explore as well. So my final note goes to our speakers and our guides for this afternoon: Lucia from Limina Collective and Emma here at the Palace of Holyrood House, and also to yourselves for joining us, and very much hope that you've enjoyed this slow looking this afternoon. Thank you very much and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you, Lucy.